many of you have actually read those terms and conditions of your cruise contract before you hit accept? Be honest. I didn't either, at least not until recently. Before our last Princess cruise, I actually decided I was going to read that contract. There were some things that really surprised me, including the one about gratuities, being able to search your cabin, removing you from the ship even without a refund, and changing that itinerary that you thought you booked. So today I'm sharing 10 of the most interesting and maybe important things I found when reading that cruise contract that you should know before your next vacation. Now, just one quick disclaimer before we begin. I'm not an attorney. I don't work for Princess. So what I'm giving you is my interpretation of the contract as I read it. I'm not giving any legal advice, just sharing what I found. And of course, contracts can and almost always do change. So be sure you look at your contract before your next cruise to know what you've signed up for. Okay, let's jump in, and I'm going to start with gratuities. Now, there were some things that aren't going to surprise any seasoned cruiser. Gratuities are based on your cruise cabin category and are added to your account automatically. And they're going to add service charges for things like beverage packages or specialty dining. And they're going to allow you to adjust those gratuities based on your discretion. There was one thing that surprised me a bit, and I'm going to read that directly from the contract. The crew appreciation and service charge payments, excluding spa service charges, on all vessels in our fleet are pooled and distributed in the form of compensation, including bonuses to crew members, including those in the bar, dining, entertainment, housekeeping, guest services, galley, and onboard revenue areas. First, let me say that I appreciate that Princess is sort of transparent about where those gratuities go. But I don't love that they're part of the crew compensation, because I think of a gratuity as a payment for excellent service, not as part of a paycheck. And even when they say bonuses, are those tied to customer satisfaction, or is it tied to the amount of revenue they generate, for instance? We've always prepaid our gratuities before a cruise, but honestly, this made me think we're going to have a further discussion about that. But I'd love to know what you guys do. And if you happen to be or have been a crew member on one of the ships, I'd especially love to hear from you what the cruise perspective is. Next, the cruise line can deny you boarding if your documents aren't correct. Now, this one's incredibly important. According to the contract, you are responsible for making sure that you have all the correct paperwork for your trip. Not the cruise line, not your travel advisor, you. So make sure that you have the correct documents before you get to the port. If you don't, Princess can deny you boarding. And according to the contract, if you show up and you don't make it on that ship, they are not responsible for refunding you. The other thing that stood out to me was the document requirements for families. So for some of the itineraries, if there's an adult traveling with a child, everybody's got to have a passport. Not a birth certificate with an ID, a passport. And they do that, I think, because if you or the child has to get off the ship for, let's say, an emergency, that you both have a passport so you can get home. Just know that you have to do your research and make sure that you have your documents to get on the ship and for every stop along the way. Now, we've all seen those pier runners, right? Everyone cheers and everyone laughs. And let's face it, even if you're watching it on YouTube, it's kind of funny. But it's not funny for those who are doing the running. If you miss the ship, it is your responsibility to get to the next port or to get home. The cruise line isn't going to pay for any of those expenses. And if you just decide you're going to get off at a port, say you wanted to stay a few extra days in Santorini, well, there can be custom and immigration fines and consequences if you get off that ship. So if you've ever joked about getting off and staying in the Caribbean, maybe don't. Now, this is one that you probably haven't given too much thought about or maybe don't even know about. But most of us will purchase a cruise based on a destination, right? I want to go to Glacier Bay in Alaska, or I want to go to Santorini in Greece. And I really choose my cruise ship date and time based on the destination and the cruise ports. But according to the contract, Princess can change your ports, your shore excursions, modify activities, change schedules, or even cancel the cruise altogether if necessary. Whether mechanical problems, port issues, security, there's a million different reasons why they might have to do that. So, in the case of mechanical failures that cause them to have to cancel the cruise, you're going to be reimbursed for your full cruise fare. It does not say anything about reimbursing you for your non refundable flights or your non refundable hotel rooms or your rental car. And with the exception of mechanical failures, it indicates that if the cruise is terminated and you're landed, there's no further liability of the carrier for refunds, compensation, credit, etc., except where a refund is required by law as a result of a declaration of public health emergency or government order canceling the cruise in question or delaying travel for more than 24 hours. It goes on to say that only when the cancellation or change is within the exclusive control of the carrier, the liability for the carrier is limited, and then they go through several instances of where they might be compensating you. So if you want more details about that, definitely go into the contract. It's too long to read on camera. But as far as I'm concerned, the moral of the story is if something happens, they're not always going to refund you or credit you or reimburse you. And so you want to just know that going in. So that's one of the reasons why you should probably consider travel insurance to see if it makes sense for you. And medical emergencies. Now, definitely this one makes me think of getting travel insurance because things like going to the doctor on the ship is not free. And certainly, if they have to evac you out, that is not going to be free. That is going to be part of your responsibility, and your health insurance may not even cover it. And the cruise contract points out that those services may not be free, but it also points out something that I don't know, I'd never given it any thought, which is that you may not be able to get evacuated off the ship, depending again on the itinerary, how far you are from land, what the options are. And, this is not a floating hospital. Now, I am sure the medical staff is going to do their very best, but just know that there's some limitations to what they can provide, and they may not be in a position to evac you off the ship. Now, that's not to scare anybody. I mean, honestly, that doesn't happen a lot, I'm sure, but just know it's in the contract. And here's another thing that probably doesn't happen very often, but the contract does say that princes can remove you from the ship. They can deny you boarding, they can confine you to your cabin. And if that happens because you violated the contract, they can kick you off the ship and they are not responsible for getting you back home or reimbursing you for any of those expenses. Again, this probably isn't something that happens very often. I think they probably have it in there just in case, but it's a good thing to know, so don't act a fool. Now, when it comes to smoking, most people know that there are designated areas on the ship where you can smoke. What's in the contract is the consequences if you choose not to do that. According to the contract, smoking outside designated areas results in a $250 charge for each violation. And if you do it repeatedly, you could get removed from the ship at your own expense. So, if you're a smoker, including e cigarettes and vaping, make sure that you do that in the smoking area. Now, this one absolutely caught my attention. The contract gives Princess the right to search your luggage, which you may know sometimes people will get a slip in their luggage to say that it's been looked at. But that policy also applies to your stateroom, your personal belongings, the things in the safe. Now, again, I imagine this is primarily for security, and there are probably some instances where they have to use it. I've never had that happen to me, and I don't know anybody who that's happened to. But it's in the contract probably to make it easier to deal with any nefarious people on the ship. Now, if your luggage gets lost, don't assume the cruise line is going to reimburse you for everything that's inside. The cruise contract limits their liability for lost luggage. That's why we always recommend that important things like medication, cash, electronics, travel documents, all of those things stay in your carry-on that you bring on the ship when you board. Don't put any of that in your luggage. And of course, the contract talks about things that are not allowed on board, including medical marijuana. Even if it's legal where you live or you've got a prescription, Princess does not allow marijuana on board. So be sure to talk to your doctor in advance if that applies to you. And finally, this one's not going to make or break your cruise, but it was interesting. I hadn't even actually thought about it, but according to the contract, photos and videos of you can be used by Princess for marketing and promotional purposes. They don't need any specific written permission either because you signed the terms and conditions of the contract as soon as you purchased your cruise. Now again, I don't see the cruise company abusing this. I mean, let's face it, we expect a certain level of privacy when you're on a cruise ship. And if they abused it, cruisers obviously wouldn't be happy. But the next time you see a commercial or a brochure with a group of people line dancing on the pool deck, look closely because you might be in it. So, reading this contract did not make me want to stop cruising. In fact, I feel like the clauses are pretty standard across the industry, but I do think it's worth taking a look at what you agreed to before you hit accept. Now, I'm curious, which one of these surprised you most? Let us know in the comments. If you found it helpful, of course, we always appreciate a like. And if you enjoy getting this type of content, think about hitting subscribe. Thanks for watching. And for now, this is Kathy from Suitcase Packed Will Travel. We'll see you in the next one.